What's going on, everyone? This is Stephen Farmer, and welcome to the Reality Check podcast. I'm so excited that you have joined me today. I know that it's been quite some time since I've made an episode. I will explain in just a second. The title of the episode is Okay, so what's next? And the reason I say that, I've been trying to figure out what I want to call this episode. I'm speaking on all things transition today and how we go through transitions in life. And so I was trying to think, I thought about just naming it transition. I was like, that's so lame. Like, I like having a creative name for my episodes and something that gets your attention, like I can't feel my legs, I like those types of titles. And so, today I wanted to share with you, the idea of transition, and it's something that happens for everybody. No one, escapes transition. That's a pivotal part of life, and it happens multiple times throughout your life. When I think about transition, I think about the fact of just an elementary, going from, elementary school, which is, for me, it's kindergarten all the way up to sixth grade. Once you make that jump from sixth grade to seventh grade and you jump into junior high, right, which is seventh and eighth, that is a huge jump. Now it's 2 grades that you're dealing with. When you get to your eighth grade year, you're like, top guy, top girl on campus, you're like the oldest one there, the older ones, and life's a lot different. But then all of a sudden you make the jump from junior high to high school. And I believe junior high is such a pivotal point in life when it comes to knowing Christ. If you can win a junior high student, right, someone who is 13, 14 years old, if you can cause them to find out who Jesus is, right, and they have a personal relationship with him, they accept him into their heart at that age, it's so pivotal because it carries on into their high school years. And I like to believe and I've seen it, they tend to carry it on through, all the way through high school, and they can make it into college and into the workplace and all over. And so, I believe it's so important, even freshman year. It's when students are more impressionable. They're not too cool yet for Jesus. They're not too cool to listen to a minister or someone speaking to them. But when you make that jump from junior high to high school, and you're a ninth grader now, you're in a room with people who are now 18 years old, 12th graders, and the guys have hair on their face and the girls are a lot more mature, and sports are a lot more competitive. And, you used to be like a star athlete in junior high playing football, but now it's like, oh snap, like there's a lot of really good people out here. I can't catch the ball as good as such and such, and I can't run as fast as such and such, and I can't hit and make those plays. And when it comes to basketball and soccer and things, it's just a lot different. And then there's this thing called GPA, and it's like, it's there in junior high, but a lot of kids don't pay attention to that. And in high school, a lot don't, and they realize how important GPA is, and that it literally determines college and your, further education. And that's why so many students drop out, and you see the dropout rate in 8th grade, it changes, and so many kids stop going to school, and because they realize that there's work that has to be put in, right? And there's a transition that takes place and a maturing that takes place. And once you get out of high school, you have 2 choices. You can either go into the workplace and immediately get a job and start working if you didn't have a job already while in high school. Some people I know have jobs while they are in school. Or you could go to college, and then you have to determine what it is that you want to do. There's the choice of moving out of your family's house your freshman year. I advise for those of you that are in high school and are looking to go to college, I'm not advising you that you have to stay in Louisiana. I mean, yeah, I believe that that's important. You want to help your own city, your own state, and I advise people staying and helping their states. But obviously, I'm not going to tell you to not chase your dreams. But I will say that, when it comes to moving out and when it comes to making those pivotal decisions, I advise, honestly, if you're going to where I'm from, where we are from right here in Hammond, Louisiana, we have Southeastern. If you go to Southeastern, I advise living with your parents. Make the drive, the 20-minute, 30-minute drive or 10, 15-minute drive. Live with your parents while you go to college. Save some money. And then move out, once you're getting close to the end of school. If you can't deal with it and you're like, I got to move out, I want to I want to have some freedom, and okay, go ahead, But that is a transition. that takes place when you move out. There is a big jump. Now you having to pay your bills. Now you're having to get groceries. Now you're having to live with somebody, especially when you get a dorm on campus. You have to live with a random person. That was something I was like, I'm not doing. I'm not living with some random Joe. Like, I have morals and beliefs and things, and I'm not about to have some guy come in and he's come upend everything that I'm trying to do. Like, nah, I'll just stay with my family. And so those are big choices to make. When you go to college, you have change of career paths and things in different majors you want to do. When you go into the workplace, you might lose your job. You might get moved somewhere else. There's just transition after transition after transition. You get married, you have kids. All that is transitions. And some are big and some are small. But at the end of the day, there are transitions, and nobody really likes transition. It's not a fun moment, but it's a pivotal moment, and it's an important moment. When I think of transitions, I think of movies. I love to edit and create videos, and a thing that you don't really notice when you're watching movies is they have transitions. Some movies are a lot of cuts, especially TV shows. Bad TV shows do a lot of cuts with no transition, and it's like super close up and then back up, and then it's like this other side and this other angle, and then another run, and then a run here, and then another cut here, and another cut, and they like different angles, and it's like while you're watching, you're like this, and then they have like the smooth transition, right, where the passage of time, and you see the person talking, and then it fades, and it shows the mountains, and then it fades again, and then they're in the house, and it shows time passing, right? Transitions are like, when I think of transitions, I think of that. I think of movies and film, but I also think of with transition in film, I think of, those super awesome action-packed films that you watch. When you see the huge car chase, right? Your superhero film, and they have the big battle, and all these things are fighting, and the person is getting shot at, and everything happens, and it's like super cool, and you're like eating your candy and your popcorn, you're in the theater, and it's like, wow, this is like a super sick scene. And it's always the scene right afterwards. It's like a bore. You're like, oh man, this is boring. That's when you get up and go to the bathroom. I'm going to go get some more popcorn right now. I'm going to go get a refill, because it's a slow point. It's the part where it's like nothing's really happening and it's kind of slow, and you're like, man, I'm ready for it to pick back up again, right? But it's in those moments and those parts where the film is transitioning to another scene, it's transitioning to the next high point. That's so pivotal, because it's in that slow point that so many details are given. So much of the story is taking place in the slow parts, right? It's where the character development takes place. It's where you're finding out the problem, how we're going to have the solution. It's where the characters are developed, and you really get to see, them on the screen, and see how they deal with this problem, how they dealt with what just took place on screen moments before when they were getting shot at, and all the crazy stuff. And the thing is that as much as we hate transition, as much as we hate going through them, they're so pivotal, because they are literally, it's like God's way of preparing you for what's next, right? But in this generation and in our culture, and the way we are made now, because we get things so quick, we're ready for the next thing. When you're on Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and any social media, Instagram, all these things, when you're watching a video, if you don't feel like watching, you just scroll, right? You watch it, the first 3 seconds don't get your attention, you just keep scrolling. Oh, it makes you laugh. And even if it made you laugh, you don't want to watch the rest of it, so you just scroll through. You watch about 25 seconds and you keep going. Why? Because what's next? And that's just how we are, And so when we get hit with that slow point in life, when things aren't really going as quick as we'd like, and things aren't really lining up the way we want to, we start to ask the question, what's next? And what is God doing? And why am I in this position? And why is this happening? And why does this have to happen? And so, to kind of jump into what this is all about, and why I'm talking about transition is my family and I are in a huge transition, and it's one that wasn't taken lightly. My dad made a decision. Just to make this short and simple, he made a decision to dissolve the church that he has been pastoring for the last 10 to 12 years. I say 10 to 12 because we officially, launched it at a certain time, and so it was 10 years officially under the name Southland, but for 2 years before that, we were meeting as a church, and so he made the decision to dissolve the church. And that was a decision that was not made lightly. It wasn't one that we were just like, all right, yeah, let's just dissolve it. It wasn't like that. It was something that took a lot of thought, a lot of prayer, a lot of tears were shed, tears that are still being shed. And so, I wanted to kind of address this in a way, and when it comes to this stuff, this is family stuff, and I mean, it's out there now. Of course, we had to tell our church and things, but a lot of people, being a pastor's kid, or a PK is what I always call myself. I'm used to people talking. I'm used to people assuming things. I'm used to people having their opinion. Growing up as a pastor's kid, you get used to people expecting things of you. It's either one or two things. Either they expect you to be the most perfect person in the whole world, or they expect that you're just fake and that you're a hypocrite, and so I'm used to that, and obviously I'm neither one of the two. I'm not perfect. I am not the best person in the world and never make a mistake, but I'm also not a hypocrite person that's just awful and terrible and, the whole deal. I'm not either one of those. I'm just a human being who absolutely loves Jesus and makes mistakes and needs God's grace just as much as the next person. And I never want people to think that when I speak on this mic and when I put videos out there that I'm coming across as a know-it-all, or, listen to Stephen Farmer because he knows everything there is about the Bible. No, I don't, and I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes, and but what I do want you to know is that I absolutely love Jesus, and I love church, and I love being a pastor's kid. I took pride in that. That's something that I absolutely love, and so to be on this other side right now that Dad has dissolved the church, this past Sunday, I went to church for the first time ever, not as a pastor's kid. I went in, I'm sitting in the chairs, and I don't have any responsibility. It was the weirdest thing. I'm sitting there, I don't have to do sound, I'm not making the graphics, I'm not doing music, I'm not having to do the announcements, I don't have the order of service, so I have no idea what's coming up. I don't know what's on the agenda. I don't know the events that are about to take place. I don't know what dates they've picked their, family, friends day thing, or their Christmas production, Easter production, and I don't know any of it. I'm completely in the dark, just like everybody else in the congregation. And it's weird, it's different, and it's something that I'm still trying to grasp and fix my eyes on and understand, because I'm so used to being the guy behind the scenes. I'm so used to being the one that had to make the graphic for said event. I'm so used to getting the order of service and running the sound and doing the media and getting up and speaking on a Sunday sometimes, and helping with youth and helping with college. And that's what pastors' kids do. You kind of have to, the jack of all trades, you got to learn how to do everything, and it doesn't mean that it's good. It just means that, hey, you're available. So, hey, go do kids ministry, and hey, go do, the sound, and go flip on the lights and do the graphics. And I need you to run the kids thing this weekend. And, that's just how it is, And so it was different sitting in the pews, and I say pews, really in the chairs, and just listening to someone else preach and not having my dad speak into my life. Totally different. Very, very weird. And this is a weird transition. And the reason why my dad decided to do this wasn't that, like I was saying, with people assuming that, it must have been COVID, COVID got to him. Well, yeah, COVID was, there, and it was a problem for all churches, and mega churches, were affected, and people stopped coming to church. People got complacent. People started to think that, they don't need to go to church. They can just watch it online. And we all know that, come on now, really, do you really watch Stephen Furtick's hour and 10-minute long message? Come on. I know you don't. Unless you're wanting to take that message and speak it yourself, or take it and pull some things and use it for your small group lesson, or to speak and do what, you're not going to watch that. Odds are you're going to watch about 20 minutes of it, and then, oh, wait, somebody just texted me, and let me click on that, and I'm going to watch that real quick. That's my uncle texting. Oh, that's my kids texting. And then your kid comes around and hits you, and they need food, so you put the phone down, and you go in there, and you make it, and you come back, and let me watch them, and now you don't know what's going on. Why? Because you can't, you can watch church online, and I'm not against church online, But I am against that being your main church and that being the only church you go to. The Holy Spirit can move anywhere. God is everywhere, and he can move through a video. He can empower you just like he can empower you through this podcast. But it doesn't beat being in a physical location surrounded by fellow believers who are just as imperfect as you, trying to learn about Jesus, hearing a pastor in the flesh, standing on the stage right in front of you, speaking a message that hits your heart, impacts you, and you're able to go to the altar, get on your knees, and go to God. And then go to the pastor and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or hey, I'm doing well in this area. Will you pray for me? We're about to make this huge decision. There's nothing like that. I champion you. I challenge you. If you're not in a church, if you're depending on a video pastor, a message on the screen to empower you, sure, God can empower you anywhere. But nothing beats being in a physical church, having real people standing next to you, going through the same things you're going through, able to build you up. That is so important. That's why we read the New Testament and you see Paul writing these letters to what? The church. He's writing to the church. Why? Because he wants to inspire the church. He corrects the church. He champions the church. He's telling the church, hey, listen, I believe in you. Hey, stop doing this. Keep doing that, right? Empower people. Tell people there's heretics out there. There's crazy false teachers. There's people trying to speak negativity. You see all this stuff on the news right now. And, you got right now in the elementary schools, they're trying to teach all this crazy whack stuff on identity and transgender and homosexuality. And they're trying to teach kids that are like 5 years old about sexuality. It's like, please let the kid just be innocent. Please. I want to go back to when I was 5 and I didn't know about all this stuff. I want to be a kid again. Everyone wants to. Why are we trying to make kids grow up? Let them be 5. Let them be 6. Let them play with their blocks and say their hair's real pretty and I like dinosaurs and I like koalas. Like that is let them be kids. And so I want to be in a church. I want to be around a church, around people that are empowering me to continue to love Jesus and to find my identity in Him. Not what the government says, not what some people online say, not what Twitter tells me to think and what Fox News says or MSNBC or CNN. Stop getting your life and what you need, your food from these news sources and what the media and the agenda is trying to paint to you. I'm going to let you know something. I'm a comm major. I went to school for communications, for journalism. Let me tell you something. There is always an agenda. And there's always something from any news outlet that's trying to be pushed on to you, the consumer. Because they know that if they can get your face in front of that screen and watch what they are trying to say, and they repeatedly say it all the time, they sit there, I'll watch Fox, and they'll talk about MSNBC and CNN, and look how many times they say this. Aren't they trying to say something? But if you were to do the same thing with Fox, they do the same thing. They all are trying to get you to believe a certain thing. It's the agenda. That's the whole point. It's, hey, don't look over here, look at me. And the thing is stop looking at this and start opening your Bible. Get in a church, get plugged in and hear the word because that is the truth. Base your life on Him. I'm speaking a message. I'm supposed to be talking about transition. I just switched. This is nothing on my notes. The thing is that when my dad made the decision to transition out of church and to dissolve this, the reason why wasn't because of COVID, but more so this. In 2019, my dad, this is before COVID, was approached by multiple people that asked him the same question. It wasn't like they all talked and were like, hey, let's all go to him separate times, This is just random people that came up, family, friends, family members, people that were in our church, people that weren't in our church that just were talking to us, They came up to Dad and they'd ask the same question, are you called to pastor a church? And my dad would answer the same thing every time. Yes. Like, what are you talking about? Well, when you talk about Face It Ministries, your baby jumps. And when I say baby jumps, I'm talking about when Mary went and visited her cousin Elizabeth, right? The mother of John the Baptist. And you're talking about Mary who gave birth to Jesus Christ. When she visited Elizabeth, the Bible says in Luke chapter 1, and I wanted to read it for you because there is power in reading the word out loud. Luke chapter 1, verse 39 through 41, it says, "A few days later, Mary hurried to the hill country of Judea, to the town where Zechariah lived. She entered the house and greeted Elizabeth." I love this. She greeted Elizabeth. All she did was say, "Hey," okay? At the sound of Mary's greeting, Elizabeth's child leaped within her, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Can you imagine? You walk into a room and you say hey to somebody and the Holy Spirit falls on them and they get hit. You walk into a room and they just get hit with the Holy Spirit just out of the words, "Hey, hello, how's it going? What's up?" And you're greeting, the Holy Spirit bounces on somebody. Like, that is so cool to me. Like, I just focus on the words and honestly, I want to be around people that make my baby jump. Now, I know I'm a male and I ain't got no baby in me, but let me tell you something. There's a dream inside of me. And when I get around people who are inspirational, who are life-giving, who are positive, they make my baby jump. And I want to get around people who make my baby jump. I want to get around people that lift me up, that empower me, that say, "Hey, man, I believe in you." I don't want a yes man, but I want somebody that's real and says, "Hey, listen, I believe in you. I'm here for you. Let me help you." Right? And the thing is that when Mary came and visited Elizabeth, life was inside of Mary. You got Jesus Christ on the inside of you. Literally, the baby of Jesus is in Mary. And when she got around Elizabeth, just saying, "Hey," it made Jonathan, right? John the Baptist inside of Elizabeth leap for joy. When these people have come to my dad, they said, "When you talk about face it, your baby jumps. There's life there. Face it brings life to you." And my dad kept kind of blowing it off. We had this woman come up and she prophesied this big thing and how we're going to have a facility and yada, yada, yada. And we're going to speak to all these people and empower young people and the whole deal. And Dad was like, "That's great," And he thought, okay, well, this is just one woman. And he believed it. And he was like, "Man, I love that. But I don't believe that I'm supposed to not pastor a church." This is 2019. Another family that had spoken our church and were leaders in our church had come up and said, "Hey, I think that you're called to do Face It. I think you're supposed to step into it." A family friend of ours, Ashley, came up to us one time, and I've been knowing Ashley since I was 8 years old, had come to me one time. She wasn't even going to Dad. She just said, "Hey, I think your dad, is supposed to get back into Face It full time." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And me being a pastor's kid, number one, I don't know what to do with that. And so I was like, yeah, hey, that's awesome. I believe that if Dad, because I do believe that if Dad steps into it, Face It's going to grow. I think that we're going to be able to do more. But I don't necessarily mean that Dad needs to be out of church and not do that. And she, of course, was like, "Yeah, I know, but and I knew what she was trying to say, but I think he's supposed to, That's 2019. Now, 2020 comes, and all of a sudden, there's this opportunity. My parents have always wanted to go to Israel. And but obviously, if you know anything about Israel, number one, it's super far. To get a plane ticket to Israel is crazy amount of money. To go stay there for a week or 2 weeks is stupid money, okay? And it's not that my parents are freaking broke or anything. I'm not saying that, but my parents don't have money to go to Israel, okay? We go to Dominican Republic or Costa Rica and it's $1,800, okay? And you're like, okay, we got to do some fundraisers, we got to raise our money and we got to be able to go to Israel. That's nah, that's a dream, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And my dad was like, "Man, I'd love to go there. I would love to be there." One of his dreams was he wanted to renew his wedding vows with my mom in Israel. That was a dream of his. And so a pastor called him one day and was like, "Hey, listen, we're getting a team ready for Israel. We're looking to see if anybody's interested." My dad was like, "Well, yeah, I am, but I could never afford it." He said, "Well, we have this deal, the group that we go with and the people, it has this huge discount for pastors and people of ministry. And when I say stupid cheap, it was stupid cheap." And then my parents found out that they owned this land that they thought was worth nothing. They thought it was just worth, pennies, and it turned out to be worth thousands of dollars. And my dad put it up for sale and it immediately sold. He said, "God, if this sells, then I'll know I'm supposed to go to Israel." And it sold immediately. And so Dad took the money, put it towards the trip, and it was a once in a lifetime trip. And what was so cool is this was in January or February. I think it was February. They went on the trip. They went to Israel. While they're there, COVID hit a month later. Okay, this is God. Okay, I know it's God. They're in Israel. They're at Shiloh, and my dad's talking. He said, Lord, your presence was here so many years ago, and it was here for years and years and years. You spoke to so many people here, and God, do you still speak here? Will you speak to me right now? And the whole time he was there, he was contemplating everything that happened in 2019, what people kept saying about the church, and he was thinking about it, and he was like, man, am I supposed to pastor a church, and am I supposed to do Face It full time? And all this stuff was going through his head, and he had asked God to speak to him. Well, in the moment of saying that, this man who was on the trip with them that my dad knew from many years ago, that he would, was in his life years ago, but hasn't been, comes up and puts his hand on my dad's shoulder and begins to just speak to him. And in the process of speaking, my dad's listening, and all of a sudden he was like, wait a minute, this guy's prophesying over me. And everything he's saying is everything that I was just talking to God, and it's about Face It. And all of a sudden the guy said, hey, are you, do you think that you're still called to pastor a church? And my dad was like, what is going on? Like, this has already been talked about. Like, people keep asking me this. Why do they keep asking? And he was like, I think that we're supposed to build something together. I believe that God is calling you to, and he just began to prophesy again about Face It and Dad's role in Face It. And it was so empowering, so cool. My dad walked away, he was with my mom, and he looked at her and he was like, do you hear this? Like, do you hear what he's saying? This is like stuff that we've been talking about for the last year. And then, y'all, a month later, COVID hit. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. Flash forward another year, and we're in 2021, and it's around Christmas time, and my dad's in Target, and he's walking around, and he runs into that same guy that was on the trip with them in Israel randomly. And the guy said, hey, I'm waiting on you, Steve. My dad said, waiting on what? He says, you know exactly what I'm waiting on. And Dad said, oh, man, listen, I hear you. I know what you're saying, and I've been thinking about it, but, I got to hear from God. God's got to tell me that's a big decision. And he said, well, how many words do you need, Steve? And my dad was like, well, one, And he said, all right, well, I'm waiting on you. You just let me know whenever you make that decision. I'm here. I'm here for you, And so my dad was like, all right, and he got in his car and he went home. And, y'all, he had a dream. My dad had a dream. And, a couple weeks had gone by, and he had this dream that he was somewhere in the Middle East, and standing in front of him was this guy, and he was like decked out in like all these like robes and like super nice weird clothing, but it was like the old Bible time clothing. And in the dream, my dad said that he was looking at him, and he said I was talking to God in the dream, like praying. And he said, God, is that Abraham? Is that Abraham I'm looking at? And the guy kind of turned and walked, and he said, go. And the guy walked. And so my dad was like, well, wait a minute. Was that Moses? Maybe that was Moses, I mean, the way, the clothes he was wearing, it kind of, he was a Middle Eastern dude. It looked kind of like maybe that was Moses. And he heard the word go again. And then he turned, and the guy that he ran into at Israel and the guy that he ran into in Target was standing there. And he saw him, and he heard the words go again. And then all of a sudden, when I say this dream, it's so crazy. It just seems like there's no way people could believe it. It just seems so wild to me, okay? But all of a sudden, Dad said it just broke out into song. Go, go, go. And he said, and it was like beautiful and like well done. But I mean, how do you make go, 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 go? But it was like this beautiful music, and it just kept saying go, 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 go. And my dad woke up, and immediately Dad knew, because he had heard it again in the dream. How many words do you need? How many words do you need? And immediately he went, oh my gosh, I only need one. Go. And immediately Dad got up, and he knew, I have to say yes, and I need to go. And it was that week, I believe it was that week, that my dad gave me the order of service at church. On it was that dream he had told us about. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dad's going to do this thing. He's really doing it. He got up, he spoke, shared with the church his dream, shared with him what's been going on for the last 2 years. And then really 3 years. And he made the choice to dissolve the church. And y'all, it is a huge, huge choice. One that, again, was not taken lightly. One that is like, still to me, I'm trying to wrap my mind around. Like I said, I've been a pastor's kid all of my life, ever since I was born. My dad was a youth pastor. When they had me, I was passed around the church. I was actually thrown up in the air and dropped as a baby and broke my sternum in the church by one of the youth kids. I won't say his name. I love him to death. He's doing great things, and God is using him still to this day. But I've been a church baby my entire life, and I've had parents as ministers my entire life. And so for this change, this doesn't just transition from my dad. This is a transition for me and my family all. That's from my mom, for Micah, for Caleb, for Luke, and myself. And it's one that I'm still trying to get used to. I've had a dad as a pastor and a dad, my entire life. He's who has ministered into me. He's the one who's trained me up and taught me how to speak. He's the one who's got me up in front of people. I'm so grateful for my dad. I'm so grateful for his obedience. I'm so grateful that he is demonstrating to me right now what it means to truly act out faith. It's so powerful. It's so cool. Scary, but so cool. Transition's never fun. Trusting God is not always fun. And people quote Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." But that's easier said than done, to trust that, especially when you don't see it happening, when nothing's really changed and we're still doing face it at the, where we're at. And it's like, man, when's it going to happen? But we're trusting God the same way Joseph trusted God in the Bible. Joseph went from having a dream that his entire family would bow down to him, right? He told his family he was thrown into a pit. He was hated, right? Sold into slavery. The dude got falsely, accused of rape, thrown in prison, interpreted some dreams, did some help, and then was forgotten in prison. Then he interpreted the dream for the Pharaoh, and he was promoted to second in command. And then his family came, and they ended up bowing down to him. It was crazy, that story. But I just said that so fast, but let me tell you, that was years of that man's life. But at a young age, really like a teenager, like 18 years old or whatever, he had the dream that his entire family would bow down to him. But it wasn't until he was I think in his 30s or 40s or somewhere, that actually took place. Talk about a major transition, going from having a family to being thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, all the way into Egypt, and then you're falsely accused of rape, you're thrown in prison, all the amount of transitions, right? And all through all that, God was with him. Actually, Joseph had favor in all of it. When he was sold into slavery, he had favor with Potiphar. The dude loved him. He was a slave to this man. The guy actually loved him and put him in charge of everything in his household. When he was falsely accused of rape and thrown in prison, he had favor with God and favor with the prison warden, that he was in charge of all the inmates in prison. He is a prisoner in charge of the other prisoners. What? God was with him there. When he was forgotten in prison, God was with him there. So much so that years went by, and the guy that he had helped, right, the I think it was not the baker, but the cupbearer or whatever, was the one who, thought of him when the Pharaoh was having those bad dreams, and didn't know what to say about him. He said, "Oh my gosh, there's this guy named Joseph that interpreted my dream, and it came true because God's with him. He can interpret your dream," right? God was with him there. When he brought in front of Pharaoh, talk about scary. This is a slave who was accused of rape, and now he's standing in front of Pharaoh. He could be killed. You don't know what's going to happen. He asked him for a favor. What if he gets it wrong? God's with him there. He interprets the dream, and he's put in second command. Then while he's in second command, God brings his family, right, in, and they bow down to him. That story is so powerful, but it was a major transition, major change in Joseph's life multiple times throughout his walk with God. But the thing is that he stayed committed. He trusted God's plan through thick and thin. He trusted him all the way through to the very end. And that's what we have to do. That's what I encourage you to do. Maybe you're in transition. Maybe, you're in the process of thinking of moving out. Maybe you're trying to find a place. You're wondering where you're supposed to go to school, what your major's going to be. Maybe you are engaged and you're about to get married, and you know that this is about to be a huge change of life. It's no more, life on your own, doing your own thing. Now you're accountable for someone else. Now you got to put up with that guy or that girl, and now you got to deal with their issues too. And now you're not just you're together, and now you're one. And so there's no video game staying up till 3 a.m. anymore. There's no, spending crazy money at the store for just yourself. Now you got to make some changes. Maybe you're having your first child or second child, third child, or however many. Maybe you don't have any kids and you're just planning to get a dog or a cat or something that's just, I don't know. Maybe your kids just moved out and you're embracing life that way. Maybe you're an elderly person and maybe you just lost a loved one. Maybe your spouse has passed away and you're on your own. And there's a big transition now. Transitions happen all the way to the end. But I encourage you to trust God in the transition. Know that the slow point is when God is moving too. And just because you don't see him moving, just because things might not make sense right now, doesn't mean that God isn't planning something, isn't moving behind the scenes. He's got a plan. He always does. And if you just trust him and put your faith in him, he will be there with you all the way through. And at the end of the day, he's going to provide, and that big moment's going to come again that we're all waiting for. Just like in the movies, that big climactic part is coming. But let's just pay attention to the details that are laying out in front of us right now. Let's trust God and allow him to make the changes that he needs to make in our lives through this transition. So I thank you so much for joining me today. Man, big things are happening for Face It. I know God is going to do huge things for the ministry. My dad's stepping back into this thing. I know that our dream, of course, is to go statewide, to be in multiple schools within Louisiana and all over. And I am believing I've already seen God move. God has positioned people in our life, people that we haven't met just yet, that we've talked to, that are inspired by the ministry, and I know that big things are on the horizon. And so that gives me hope. It allows me to know that God is in the midst and that big things are coming, and I can't wait for you to see more. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you soon. Before I close, I will say that I will be, it's funny, this is ironic that I'm speaking on transition, and I will be transitioning from season 1 to season 2 of the podcast. This is our last episode for season 1, and I will be making some new episodes in the next coming weeks, probably about a month or two from now. I'm trying to get the room situated and ready. Because I want to make this a interview style podcast. I'm going to have other people on for season 2 that have some wisdom to share with you and talk about different things that I have no experience in. When it comes to marriage, having children, owning a business, going through, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a child, any of these things. I want to talk about the highs and lows in serving God. And I want you to hear from other people, not just me. That's not what I ever entailed. That's not what I envisioned for the podcast, just for me to solo this thing. I want to have guest people on, and I want you to be able to receive wisdom and knowledge from other people who are walking this walk with God just like I am. And so I encourage you, get in your word, speak with God, pray with him, be with him, and I can't wait to see you soon. Thanks again.